action to protect water quality in their local community. Today, we're thrilled to be joined by an exciting panel to dive into that a little bit deeper. And we want to say a big thank you to all of our partners, those represented on the Hangout today as our guest speakers, as well as our friends at Xylem for their support and sponsorship of this program to make it all possible. Today, we also want to say a special hello to our live and interactive sites who are joining us today. We have the students over at Chatsworth Park Elementary School in Chatsworth, California. If you guys can wave and say hello, everyone, we'll come back to you in just a little bit. Excellent. We're so glad to have you all here today and looking forward to chatting with you in just a little bit. And then over on the other side of the country in Neptune, New Jersey, we also have the students of the Academy of Allied Health and Sciences. Say hello, everyone.
Hello.
Excellent. Welcome. We're excited to have you all tuning in today, as well as, again, folks joining us from all across the country. As we go ahead and get started today, just a few housekeeping items. We really love participation from those of you who are tuning in around the world. And we want to encourage you to ask your questions. We have some outstanding speakers today who will be sharing their work on water quality and waterway conservation around the world. So you can submit your questions through two major ways. One is through YouTube directly using our chat feature. And if you're watching on the EarthEcho website, you can feel free to submit your questions via the Google form right beneath the viewer. We'll have time throughout the session to answer a few questions and have plenty of time at the end of the session for some Q&A with our amazing panelists. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm thrilled to introduce three amazing speakers today who are joining us from some of our EarthEcho Water Challenge partner organizations. We have Jesus Sanchez, the Education Director at Cuyahoga Valley Environmental Education Center in Cuyahoga Valley National Park. We have Leanne Poa from Drinkable Rivers.
Hello.
And we have Dr. Kristen Landry-Mates from Inherit. So we'll go ahead and dive right into things with our first speaker. I'm excited to turn this session over to Jesus Sanchez from Cuyahoga Valley Environmental Education Center to share a little bit more about his work in the water quality world. Jesus, take it away.
Awesome. All right, thanks, Sean. I really appreciate this. To all you virtual learners out there, really excited on the discussion that we're going to take place this afternoon in my part. Well, it's the afternoon here where I'm at. For inviting me, and to the panelists, or inspiring people around the world. It's an honor to be a part of this. I'm with the Cuyahoga Valley Environmental Education Center, part in Ohio, United States. My family is actually originally from Puerto Rico, and members of my family actually moved to Ohio in the 1950s. There's like an increase in manufacturing of steel, and that's actually how my family came to be in this region of the world. So this next, a little bit of Iowa is located within the United States. So it's considered a Midwest state, and we're in the Great Lakes region. So you can see on the maps there, Ohio is just and on the top left, you can see where we're located in terms of on the U.S. map. And within Ohio, Cuyahoga Valley National Park is in Northeast Ohio, and we're actually part of the Great Lakes watershed. And the park itself is a 33,000 acre corridor of this natural green space that sits just south of Cleveland, Ohio, which is right on the lake, and just north of Akron, which is the next largest urban city in relation to the park itself. So it's this huge green corridor that kind of connects these two large geographic cities. And in this next slide, we often refer to the park itself as an urban park. And the urban context not only means that we're geographically located next to these cities, but it also is about access, right? So because we're so close to so many people, they come to the park on a daily basis. And through this park and through these cities runs one of the richest resources that we have. And you can see it right there in that image, going right down the middle of Cleveland, Ohio, is the Cuyahoga River. So it's this really wonderful resource that we have within the park and in our community, but it really wasn't always valued and seen as such. In this next photo, you'll see this undated picture that was printed by the Cleveland Plain Dealer by a person named Marvin Green and actually shows the state of the river in the 1960s. So if you can see in his hand, you know, that's a pretty, you know, grotesque image of what the river once was. And this was the result of, you know, industrial manufacturers that were located within Cleveland. It was a very highly, you know, steel manufacturer and industry city. And there was a lack of control and regulation of how businesses disposed of their waste. So what you're seeing in his hand is actually oil deposits directly into the river. And, you know, it was because of this, in this next image, this was not an uncommon thing to see. You know, it wasn't uncommon for that river to actually catch fire. And, you know, it was estimated that the Cuyahoga River actually caught fire around 13 times. And the most infamous fire happening in 1969, fire was in 1969. Photo, see historical photo on Cleveland State Library at the in 1969. The mayor at the time of the city of Cleveland, Carl Stone, to the reporters near the Cuyahoga River immediately the following day after the river had burned. And this was in a next steps and what happened after the river burning and all the, you know, the result of all that pollution, because he was able to highlight, you know, this actual environmental crisis and how it was impacting the people in the city, and how it was impacting our waterways and our watershed in the river. So that really set in motions to really help regulate and to control businesses and industries could do in terms of disposing waste. Later on, it was published in Time magazine, an article discussing the dumping and unregulation of dumping of waste all along the Great Lakes. And it set in motion the formation of the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the Clean Water Act. And so in our next slide, you know, in addition to the established agencies and laws to protect waterways, you know, we're celebrating the 50 years of the river, you know, since its last burning. But for 25 years, the Cuyahoga Valley Environmental Education Center, we've been really educating students from our surrounding districts and those that are tied to our Cuyahoga River watershed, you know, really focusing on our impact that we have as individuals and on our surrounding natural resources, in this case specifically the river. We do water quality measuring and also looking at the daily impacts our lives have within the environment. So we work with kids from all grade levels, and we really work with awareness on maintaining the natural resources in our community. So you see there's some images of some of the work that we do. You know, I have to give a shout out because I believe one of our schools is watching today, you know, connected to this EarthEcho Water Challenge that we're part of today. So, and our education involves taking students actually down to the Cuyahoga, which is just minutes from our center. And we do water quality tests on determining turbidity levels, dissolved oxygen, and phosphates. And then participating in the EarthEcho Water Challenge, we enter our collected data into the database. And here we can track changes of this water quality measurements over time. But it's much more than that. You know, it's allowed us to really think about our own impacts and be able to measure that over time. But it also lets us kind of be connected to what's happening globally, right? And how other people are doing the same work. So our students also monitor Cuyahoga River tributaries. In the next slide, you'll see some of our older students that go down to the tributaries, which are waterways that lead into the river. And for us, this is just as equally important because many of these tributaries flow into the communities, homes and schools, and eventually go into the Cuyahoga River. So it's all connected there. And then finally, in this last photo, I just wanted to leave you with a lasting image, because this is actually an image I took when we were down in the river with the school group last summer. And while this isn't the exact location of where the river caught fire, it really shows like how far we've come in this last 50 years of really, you know, a grassroots effort, along with, you know, things that happened throughout the nation to remediate what it once was and to bring it to where it is today. You know, now it's on the verge of being a water trail where people can access and fish and do those things. So we want to continue to educate and inspire students to do this work, and hopefully inspire you all to be the next generation to continue fighting and advocating for clean water and to protect all of these wonderful resources that are in our very own backyards. So thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jesus. Thanks for kicking us off with such an inspirational story and really showing, again, the importance of communities and including young people really coming together to take an active role in restoring a body of water like this. With that, let's go over. We've got just a reminder for submitting questions. If you've got questions for Jesus or our panelists throughout the session, make sure you leave those in the YouTube chat, or again, if you're watching on our website, feel free to share those directly in the Google form right beneath the viewer. So let's go over to our classroom sites. Maybe we started with the team ever in Chatsworth Elementary. Any questions for Jesus from your end?
All right. Any questions so far? Logan.
How does the river get caught on fire?
That's a great question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, and we were actually just having this conversation. You know, so the last river fire in 1969, they said that it started with a spark because you have because it's in the city, you have rail cars and things that pass by the river constantly. So they said a spark from the rail car ignited that last river fire. But you also have people, you know, near the river that could have, you know, thrown things or, you know, lit a match and threw it into the river.
Great. And how about for over at the Academy of Allied Health and Sciences? Any questions from your side? And we can let you keep thinking on this as well, because we'll have some time to come back to you toward the end. Jesus, one more question just to run by you as well. You kind of touched on this toward the end, but you know, what advice do you have for communities around the world? There's a lot of, you know, places around the world that have struggles with water pollution and issues they may see in their communities. And maybe the rivers aren't catching on fire, but still have a lot of challenges. What advice would you give to young people who are interested in really helping improve the health of their local waterways?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. And I think, you know, it really starts with, you know, knowing that your voice has power, right? And looking for other ways to get involved. You know, and that could be as simple as doing your part to clean up, if that's the direction you want to go, or, you know, trying to find others that, you know, have a similar mindset and similar goals and inspirations to you know, kind of come together and work towards those. But, you know that your voice has power, and there's people that you can talk to and connect with, even as a young person. There's much power in that, in voicing that.
Great. Thanks so much for that perspective and for kicking us off today. With that, we're going to turn it over to our next speaker, and very excited to introduce Leanne Poa from Drinkable Rivers, one of our amazing EarthEcho Water Challenge partners, and very excited for her to share a little bit more about her work on water quality and working with communities. So Leanne, take it away.
Thank you, Sean.
Excuse me, before you do that,
Oh, go ahead.
you're not seeing any of the video slides except in thumbnail. If you could help me out by telling me how to fix that, then that would be a great help.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll send a chatter, but I'll get those up on the slide screen right now. We're jumping back between pictures. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm in Amsterdam, in Europe, and thank you, Sean, for introducing us, and EarthEcho for organizing this. It's already evening here, so classrooms are not at school now, so I hope they can see us tomorrow here in Europe. But I'm very happy to meet all of you. And have you ever considered thinking about drinking your river? Who of you in the class have ever thought about that? No one? Have you walked along your river? Who has walked along your river? Yeah, that's not even the whole class. What about swimming? Who has swum in the river? Ah, great. So you do that often more than the walking. And who has been fishing in the river? Oh, great. So there's quite some fishers. So I will share you a little bit about drinkable rivers. That's what I walk for in the river I was born in. So I am from the Netherlands. That means really lowlands. And I was born 7.7 meters below sea level. So it's already the lowlands. And then it's the lowest point of the lowlands. So it's basically, it's very close to the sea. And then it's underneath sea level. Can you imagine that? So we're quite foolish to live there and quite genius at the same time. And my river name is called the Meuse. And the Meuse starts in France. And it's 1,000 kilometers long. And I walk the whole river. So I walk the river for drinkable rivers with the dream that if we have drinkable rivers again, then means that a whole river system in a watershed. Do you know what a watershed is? Yeah, most of you know. So the result is the river, but all the side rivers that make up the river is the watershed. So if a river is drinkable, then it means that the whole watershed must be healthy. And that is what I'm suggesting to dream about and to realize. So I walked from France through Belgium to the Netherlands to the sea. And every day I stayed with local people that I didn't know. So I stayed with teachers, with mayors, with small farmers, big farmers, fishermen, all kind of different people. They didn't know me either, so they hosted me into their homes. And so I learned a lot of stories from the local people. And every day, children like you and 500 in total have helped me to every day monitor water and look at what fish can live here and what fish cannot live here and what is the temperature of the water. And it was quite special to walk last summer because every day it was very dry and very warm. We didn't have such a warm summer ever before. There were only 2 days when it was really raining and thunderstorms. And in those 2 days, the people who I stayed with upstream, so more in the south, in France, the lower part in France, where I started my walk, they were on my voicemail on my phone, wondering whether I was okay. They were worried about me. And then I realized that actually along a river, we are a water family. We are a river family. And so now I feel like I'm really mobilizing people within a watershed as river families to care for their rivers towards drinkable rivers. And how I also do that is let people think about their lifeline. So with that, it's like, what can you do to make a river drinkable again? What is your first step? And because to imagine a drinkable river, it takes the whole watershed, every one of you also, with every day and in every action. It only takes one person, one day, in one action to pollute it, but it takes the whole river family to be drinkable. So I dream about a drinkable river and how to get there. I think in 4 steps. The first step is to make it flowable again so that the river reaches the sea again and that fish can migrate up and down the river and that the river can flood at times it needs to flood. And then the second step is to have a walkable river so that we can actually reach the river that it's not only private land next to the river, but that we can make a relationship with the river, and that cities and villages build their towns again towards the city, towards the river. Then the third step is swimmable river. So the river we can be swimming in, like you have been doing, many of you. And then it means also a very good livable place for all the fish and all the plants, because then the water quality of the water is already much better. And then the fourth step would be drinkable river. And so, for instance, all the mayors along this river, I connect with each other towards a drinkable river. That is how I, for instance, also engage politicians and other experts. So this is what I do, and EarthEcho has been helping me with supplying with the kit. And I will today or Friday with World Water Day, I will announce, I will share the results with all the children. And that's what I want to give a special thank you to you now, watching all of us and listening to our stories, and also to the 500 children who helped looking at the river. I will continue looking at the River Meuse this year again and the coming years, and we will broaden it to look at rivers in Europe broad, and maybe even connect with what is happening all in the US, and in other parts in the world. Nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Leanne, for sharing your story. And it's a fascinating one that we're so thrilled to be part of and excited for you to share today as you get ready to release your data. I just wanted to apologize. We had a few technical issues, and I think we've got all the slides up now for everyone to see. So thanks for bearing with us as we sorted that out. I want to turn it back over to those viewing. Make sure, again, to send in your questions through our viewers, either on our EarthEcho website or through YouTube. And if our live sites have any questions, feel free to jump in, either one of our two schools. And while we see if our school sites have any questions, Leanne, just a question coming in for you. This was an amazing journey that you went on last year. What was one of the biggest things that surprised you from your time on your walk last summer?
Yeah, thank you. So it were 60 days I was walking, and the 1,000 kilometers you can imagine as 660 miles. I was really touched that every night I could stay at a person's and a family that I didn't know. And that was really surprising, because I in the first few days I brought my tent and I had food with me, but never did I needed that. So the doors were opening, and what was also very surprising was that whenever I would speak, that I said I'm walking every day now for water, that people were actually really touched, and that they were sharing also stories about water, and that water has a big value. One thing I also really enjoyed was that every time before we would start doing the research, the citizen science for water quality, I said, let's thank the water before using it. And then I would ask, who has ever thanked the water before using it? Maybe I can ask the classrooms again. Has any one of you using it? No?
Some head shaking.
Well, and well, I also experienced, like, local people I asked, they also said, no, we never thought. And then I said, do you think it's logical to do? Because we thank all the time people. And then they were like, yeah, that's logical. So that was really nice. And then there was one boy, and he said, I do thank the water before I go and swim in the lake. That made me really happy also.
Great. Thanks so much, Leanne, for those comments, and again, great perspective. Again, keep on thinking on your questions for Leanne and Jesus. We'll have some time at the end to chat with our full panel. But with that, I want to introduce our third and final speaker today, Dr. Kristen Landry-Montes from Inherit. I'm excited to turn over to her to share a little bit more about her story and work as well.
Hi, well, thank you, Leanne and Jesus. Those were awesome stories about rivers. And I want to thank, on behalf of our organization, EarthEcho, for inviting us here and for helping us with the water quality testing that we did last year as part of our project. So I want us to think a little bit about the water that we don't necessarily see all of the time. So how often have you thought about water under your feet that you're not even seeing, like under the ground? Can I see a show of hands for anybody who's ever thought about water that they don't see, or how important water might be that they don't see? Yeah, because we're going to be talking about these things called cenotes. And cenotes are these natural underground water features that are really prevalent, or there's several of them in the Yucatan Peninsula and in the state of Yucatan, specifically in Mexico. So the area, you can see from the slide, the area that I was working at, I was actually working in Mexico for the project I was part of last year. And I'm a researcher with the NGO, or non-governmental organization, called INHERIT. And INHERIT stands for Indigenous Heritage Past to Present. And as part of that project, we had, or as part of that organization, we had a project that was a year-long project focused on middle school curriculum in the state of Yucatan. And it was also focused on these really awesome, magical sort of underground water spaces called cenotes. And the name of that project in the Yucatan was called Yucatec Cenotes Heritage and Conservation. So if you take a look at the map here on this slide, the Yucatan Peninsula is the peninsula that sticks all the way out into the Gulf of Mexico. And so that entire peninsula is dotted with these underground cenotes, or these underground, they're kind of like mini lake systems that are all connected via an aquifer. And the aquifer system, you can kind of imagine as like veins, like the veins in your body connecting different things together and allowing for water to pass between these different cenotes. And so I worked in this area, and specifically in the state of Yucatan. So the state of Yucatan is that red, is highlighted in red there. So just so you have a sense for where this is in the world. So if we go to the next slide, I want to tell you first a little bit about the non-governmental organization I was part of. So INHERIT celebrates and supports Indigenous heritage through progressive, collaborative things that educate, conserve, and advocate for Native languages, traditions, and rights to the past. INHERIT, the NGO, is based out of the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill. So it's based out of the US, but we do projects in Latin America especially. So last year, INHERIT received funding for a year-long project from National Geographic, and that's why we were down in the Yucatan Peninsula for Yucatec Cenotes Heritage and Conservation. And specifically, we were based around the city of Valladolid. And around the city of Valladolid are several Maya communities. So in the next slide, I want to talk a little bit about what cenotes are, and then also why they are important to the Maya people. So we were a group of university students from a university in Valladolid. Several of those students were Maya themselves. And that university was called the Universidad de Oriente in Valladolid. So we were collaborating, INHERIT was collaborating with them, as well as 9 different middle schools in Maya communities around Valladolid. So we were not only university researchers, but we were working with university students, we were working with teachers from middle schools, and we were also working with student researchers who were helping us with our water conservation and water testing that we did last year. So the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about what cenotes are exactly and why they're important to the Maya people who live in Yucatan. So if we look at this diagram that's up on top, this is kind of a diagram that shows the way that cenotes work in this area. And the landscape there is made out of this karst or limestone sediment. And so rainwater kind of seeps down. It can seep down pretty easily into these systems. And so that's how we get a lot of fresh water down there. So some of these cenotes can be completely closed over. They're like caverns underneath the ground. So in that picture that you're seeing to the bottom right, that's a closed cenote. So it's completely underground, and most of the light just comes in through little holes. But all of that is fresh water. Because all of these cenotes are linked together by these aquifer systems that help to feed them. And what's important to keep in mind is that cenotes they come from the Maya word called cenote. So they have always been really important to the Maya people who live there. And the Maya are indigenous groups who've lived in the Yucatan Peninsula and other areas in both Mexico and Central America for thousands of years. So their ancestors have lived there. But there are also several Maya communities still living there, still speaking Yucatec Maya. And we're actually going to learn a little bit of Yucatec Maya at the end of the talk today. So we'll test that out. See how good we are. But in any case, these cenotes have always been important because they are basically the only source of fresh water in that entire place. So there's really very few rivers above the ground. There's very few lakes above the ground, and then maybe you have some seasonal rainfall. But besides that, the cenotes are the only source of fresh water that's natural. So you can kind of get a sense for how important they always used to be. And the picture that you're looking at, the pictures on the right are showing the way that cenote systems work, an underground cenote or closed cenote, and then also one of the holes that sometimes you have to use to get down into the cenote. So they're not all this way. Some can be open because the tops have collapsed, but sometimes you can see, some of our teachers and middle school students were taking pictures of the holes of one of these cenotes. So yeah, they're really these pretty magical underworld places. And the Maya, because they are such awesome places and this only source of fresh water, the ancient Maya always felt that they were sacred. So on the left, we're taking a look at an ancient book before the time of the Spanish conquest in Mexico. And so the ancient Maya had painted these ritual books, and we see these kind of wavy lines in that picture, and those are supposed to represent the cenote. And you can see that the cenote the ring around the cenote is actually a snake. So snakes are sometimes these creatures that are associated with these places. And in front of that image of a cenote is actually the rain god Chalk. So we know from some of this evidence and archaeological evidence early on that cenotes were really important to Maya culture. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide and take a look at what we were doing now. So one of the issues is that, similar to the issues with our river systems and river systems in Europe, is that cenotes have become very polluted. So the image on the right that you're seeing is a picture of one of the cenotes, and we were submerging an underwater drone there, or one of our students was, but you can see how much trash has been collected or is collecting in these cenotes. And there's also a lot of runoff from agricultural waste, and so this creates a lot of problems, right? Those cenotes we can no longer drink out of them in safe ways or even use the water for showering. And of course, this creates all sorts of problems for the animals and plants who live there. So together with EarthEcho, we did some water testing of cenotes just to see how contaminated the cenotes were, and to see what we could do in the future to maybe be more active, or our students could be more active in kind of going forward and working with their own communities to conserve the water and to make water even better. So we tested in our classrooms, we tested for things like the temperature, the turbidity, oxygen saturation levels, and then also pH, just to see how acidic that water might be. And as we assumed, the more trash we found in the cenotes, the more kind of contaminated they were. So the higher the temperature, They had higher turbidity, oxygen levels were lower, pH was higher, meaning the water itself was more acidic. So this creates all sorts of problems for the animals who live there. So there were fewer animals in these kind of unhealthy cenotes. So we really wanted to work with our students, and in this picture we're seeing one of our university students from the Universidad de Oriente in Valladolid actually teaching one of these lessons and working with the students in one of our Maya communities. And so all of those students are Maya, and our hope is that together with their teachers, we can, or they can actually, because they're really the future, right? And you all there in the classrooms, you're all the future, and you're the ones who are going to go forward and protect water all over the world. You have the power to do so. So that's the kind of things that we were trying to, or that we are still working with our students in doing in the Maya communities, because we want these to be conserved for hundreds of years to come, because they've always been important to water, to communities there. And before we leave, I would just like to, we're gonna work with this, with teaching a little bit of Maya or learning a little bit of Maya, but I would like to say in English first, thank you to all of our students who are here today. And I hope you realize the great power you have in becoming educated and going forward and being passionate about saving our water all over the world. You really can make a difference. So in Maya, I would like to say thank you for your attention. So yung bootik min ta ushis intan. Thank you very much to everybody and all of our supporters.
Great. Thanks so much, Dr. Medjimates, and thank you to all of our panelists for the fantastic introductions to your work and all that you're doing around the world to preserve and protect water resources with communities. I know we've got a couple questions coming in now to our Google Forms and our YouTube chat. We've got a few minutes left, so please keep adding those questions in so we can share those with our panelists. And first, I want to go over to our two live sites. Any questions for Dr. Medjimates or for the panel? And feel free to unmute and jump in if you've got a question.
How is the water pollution affecting
Oh, can you say that one a little bit louder?
A little bit louder.
How is water pollution affecting aquatic life?
In the cenotes?
Yes.
Oh, okay, so the more polluted the cenotes are, the fewer, there's a lot of fish that live in those cenotes, so the fewer fish there will be, or the fish will be very unhealthy. Yeah, or there'll be fewer plants, because with around the outside of the cenotes and even kind of inside, there's a lot of really beautiful tropical plants, and then there are things like iguanas that live in those spaces, and then fish that live there as well. And so people, I even saw students about your age who were going fishing in the cenotes. They had all of these little fish in a bag, but it came from the cenote where there was a lot of runoff from the bathrooms at the middle school that was nearby, or I'm sorry, at the elementary school that was nearby. So can you imagine if all of the runoff from the bathroom is going into the cenote? Those fish are not going to be very good to eat, right? They're going to be really unhealthy, really unsanitary. So those are some of the problems that pollution creates. Yes.
Academy of LA Health has a question. Go ahead.
Great.
How do you accommodate for pollution that is not in the water? Like, when water evaporates and goes into the sky, sometimes there's pollution up there and then it rains down acid rain. How do you accommodate for that?
Yeah, I'm sure that with additional testing, so these were the only tests that we did, but we would really like to continue testing, for example, with maybe testing phosphates next year to see how those types of things are affecting the water. That's a really excellent question.
That's great.
Yeah.
Jesus, I don't know if you want to add to that kind of from any of your perspective. I know it's something we've talked about. We've got a couple questions. I'll add to that too. We have a question coming in from Danielle that said, what particles were in the river that made it catch on fire? So I don't know if you want to touch on kind of air pollution or some of the challenges that you see there. And I know we had a slight glitch with the slides coming up, so maybe we can pull up those river burning photos again too while we do this.
No, yeah, I agree. That's an excellent question. Farmland and farms that surround the area, so you get runoff from farms that use different types of fertilizers or pesticides. But again, we also do testing for phosphates, and there's other tests that that can be conducted that we're not necessarily doing. We try to just do tests that we can work with our students with the time that we have them, but there's a variety of different types of water quality tests out there that can account for those different types of pollutions that are going into the river. And then the question about what made the river burn. So you saw like the oil slicks and deposits. So, you know, accounts from people that lived in the community back then was just, you could actually see the oil just sitting on top of the river, and that's what's actually what caught fire.
Great, good questions. And we've still got some questions coming in a couple minutes here, so I want to get over to Leanne. Leanne, we had a question from one of our viewers who wanted to know about, did you see any animals that were caught up or injured maybe in the river while you were out, or did you do anything to help save animals or see any unique wildlife when you're out on the river?
Thank you for the question. Well, one thing that many people noticed when I was walking for water is that whether I was in France, in Belgium, that all the local people were saying to me, did you notice there are many less birds, especially the swallows, those with the tail like that. And so people were making the link between the river health and even the birds. But I did see butterflies being on the footpath or on the trail sometimes that I could put aside so that not other people would tramp on it, although not many people were walking there. I did also see in a place where almost nobody walks, there was a fisherman standing, and he caught the biggest fish in his life, and he was in his 80s, so he was already quite old himself, so he was quite shocked. So the fish was more than a meter, and so I helped him take the fish out so that we could look at the fish and then return the fish into the river. So that felt like I was helping a little bit the fisherman and the fish because it was so heavy. And maybe I don't know if it's visible, but here are some of the small wildlife that you can find in the water. And we were looking with the children, so not only at all the chemical particles, but also who is living here. Here it's unknown whether it's very healthy or not, the water. Here it could be very low quality of water, and then you can see these creatures living there. If you have very good quality of water, you can notice these creatures living there. So it was very nice to see, like, if you find certain animals living there, then you could derive to see like, oh, that must be a good home if we find this one. Or if we find none of these here, then we also could know like, it's maybe quite poor, the water quality. So yes, they are the teachers, the fish and the insects living in the water, teaching us about what we can know about the water quality.
Great, and we are just toward the end of our time here. I want to do one quick thing, kind of go down a panel. We have a question from Danielle that asks, what is something that we can all do to help make sure our rivers are swimmable and drinkable? And if we can have each panelist just say, give us a 15-second or 30-second, what's your advice to everyone tuning in today? What can we do to make our waters healthier, drinkable, swimmable for all of us and all of the wildlife on our planet as well?
Maybe I'll just say one thing that we can do to help us create better water systems in general is to use less plastic. So maybe when you go to the grocery store, take your own bag. Or if you have just a few things that you're bringing home, don't ask for paper rather than plastic, because a lot of the plastic ends up in these water systems and is really, really bad for some of the animals who live there. Sometimes they can choke. I just saw something, I think it was on Facebook, where a very young whale had died because he had swallowed so much plastic that it was blocking his intestines, so he couldn't digest any of his food and he ended up dying. So I think the less plastic that we can consume, that's one way that everybody can help to make a difference for our water systems.
Great. Jesus and Leanne?
Okay, I'll go. I think I think it's important to to ask questions, right? Like, so, you know, I mentioned in my presentation that we have these streams and these rivers, and Leanne mentioned about what watersheds are. You know, we're all connected to water in one way or another. So, you know, ask those questions to yourself, to those around you, to your adults, to your teachers, you know, and get involved, right? Like, so find ways of learning about that and how you are connected to water, so you can make decisions about, you know, what you choose to, you know, the things that you choose to incorporate into your daily lives and how that can impact your surroundings and your environment.
Great. And Leanne, any closing thoughts on that? Go ahead.
Of course, I'm very thankful for that last question. And the list is like endless, but I think it can start really by having our gratitude and of the value that water is for us, because we are water ourselves and we need it every day. And so that we realize our dependency is also carrying a responsibility that we can and must care for our water. And so I think with that gratitude, the whole list from how you eat, how you clean yourself, how you live, how you garden, and all that can then start to transform. But I think to be thankful and grateful for what water means for us, and we can be that also for water. And maybe one day the rivers will say thank you to us, and we can say you're welcome.
Wonderful. Well, that's a perfect note to wrap up on. And as we close out today, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who's tuned in today, and a special thank you to our amazing panelists for sharing their time and their energy and their passion for water with us, as well as the work they do in their communities. I want to give another big shout out to the schools over at the Academy of Allied Health and Sciences for tuning in and joining us today, and also the students over at Chatsworth Elementary School. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and thanks for all you do to help protect waterways as well. Now, as we gear up and wrap up today and gear up for World Water Day this Friday on March 22nd, we encourage all of you to take action in your communities to help monitor local water quality. You can share your results through our website at monitorwater.org. And we encourage you to join the conversation, share how you're taking action to improve and protect water resources in your community using hashtag #MonitorWater on social media, and really encourage you to take action, just like all of our panelists have and the groups they've worked with around the world, to protect their local waterways. And then as part of our kickoff this year, we're also excited to share the launch of the new EarthEcho Water Challenge Action Portal. You can visit www.monitorwater.org/protect to learn more about how you can take action to protect water resources in your community and share highlights from your own work. We also encourage you to follow along with EarthEcho International on social media to learn more about our programs and other exciting opportunities for you to get involved and play an active role in changing the world in your own communities. I want to say again a special thank you to our wonderful panel and all of our partners who helped make the EarthEcho Water Challenge possible. And on behalf of our EarthEcho team, I want to thank all of you for tuning in and joining us today. I encourage you to keep on exploring and keep on protecting our water planet. Thank you all so much, and have a happy World Water Day.